A couple of ground rules I want to talk about, folks, before we get going too far is if you got a cell phone, please shut it off. And as we're going along, we have a lot of folks here that need to be at work by 8 o'clock, so I want to have this meeting done by 7:45 at the latest, so we can get people to their normal jobs. That's agreeable with everyone. Looking down at John Weber down there at the end of the bench, I'm thinking maybe do we need to do a few calisthenics to get everybody woke up here? John, are you okay? You think? All right, so we're good to go. And I'm going to officially open the council side of this meeting up, and Kim, I'll let you take over for a second. I'll let you do whatever you need to do.
Okay, so you want me to do that?
Yep.
Okay.
So official.
I'm looking for Angie.
Right behind you.
Angie, can you determine if we have a quorum present?
There are 4 trustees present.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to call to order this. I actually did it in the reverse order, but let me get it right. Pursuant to Idaho Code Sections 33506 and 33510, this special meeting of the Moscow School District Board of Trustees.
Okay, so folks, we're officially open, and what I'd like to do, I'm going to start with Wayne Krause here, and we'll go all the way around the room and introduce ourselves and we'll position what it is that we do, because I know some folks, some of the counselors do not know school board members and vice versa. So Wayne, if you'd start off, please.
Well, just introduce me, so I'm on the city council.
Eric Torak, I'm on the Moscow School Board Trustees.
Tom Lamar, I'm on the Moscow City Council.
Margaret Dibble, School Board.
Gary Reeder, I'm the Moscow City Supervisor.
Deb Adair, District Business Manager.
John Weber, Moscow City Council.
Art Pitke, Moscow City Council.
Jim Frenzel, Trustee.
Dan Carstell, Moscow City Council.
Greg Bailey, Superintendent of the School District.
And I'm Kim Campbell, Trustee.
Very good. Welcome again, everybody, for being here. And thank you, the audience out there that's with us today as well. Thank you for being here so you can listen to what we're saying. Right at this moment, of course, we're talking about the Playfields, the ball fields out off of Joseph. I'm going to turn it over to Gary here to give us a synopsis. And Gary, if you would please take over at this moment.
Thank you very much. Just a brief history. As everybody knows, we started this project discussing it back in 1997. Have gone back and forth possibilities for Joseph Street and whether we could possibly place some playfields on that piece of property. A couple of years ago, those discussions started taking shape again, and determined that we could move ahead with the cooperation of both the school district and the city council. And the school district, in fact, we were approached, the city was approached by then Superintendent Dale Kleiner, asking whether the city was still interested in the project. We were. We got an estimate of what it would take to develop the project, some preliminary designs, and the school district at that time put a $10 million, approximately $10 million bond out to the public, of which $1.5 million of that bond was for the development of the Joseph Street ball field, or playfields, excuse me. So with that, we entered into an agreement for joint development, use, and management of those playfields. The bond was passed, and so then we began to put the crew together, identified a design professional to help us with that design, west from Pullman, and Ned Warnick is here to talk about the process from his involvement through the bidding and where we are today. So Ned, would you like to?
Thank you for having me. I'll be available for questions if I don't manage to cover what most of you already know in this briefing. Beginning in November, we started working with the design planning team, the DPT committee as we called it, and ARC to develop the scope and define what this project would be. We have briefed both bodies at different times through the course of this, and so I don't think much of this has any kind of surprise factor to it. Through the months of November, December, January, February, we worked very hard to put these documents together, trying to beat the bid rush that occurs in the spring. Bidding period was through the month of March, and on April 1st we opened bids. We had 3 responsive bidders, all 3 from good contractors that we worked with before. The low bidder is Gino Construction out of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. The low base bid was $2.977 million. which as compared to our final estimate, which was a bit under $2.6 million, this came as Greg has been quoted as saying, an unpleasant surprise. That's putting it mildly on my part. Following that up, we worked very hard over the past, I guess it's been 16 days now, looking and working with bidders, subcontractors, suppliers, trying to understand the situation that we found ourselves in. And what we found is we happen to have hit the market at a time when the conditions are not that favorable for us. And it's not something that we think is a blip on the radar. We think this is going to be a long-term step in the construction market in the Moscow-Pullman area, especially in the two areas that this project is especially in need of, which is earthwork and landscaping. So looking at it from the perspective of this is not something that's an unusual result or a result that's going to change in some sort of rebid condition, we worked with the bidders and the suppliers and looked at some different things that we could do to reduce the scope, to try to close that budget gap of approximately $400,000 to $450,000. In looking at that, we found revising some product specifications in terms of the infield surfacing and the soil conditioner, providing minor schedule and duration flexibility to the contractor, which won't change the end result of when the fields will be playable or when they will appear to be green grass late this fall, but will give the contractor a little more flexibility in the way that they do the work. And revising the bedding for under drains, the French drains or drain tile, which you might know it as, going from sand to a crushed drain rock provided some savings. Those savings all told, which really don't have any impact on the quality of the project in any sort of way, gets to approximately $190,000 in credit. We did look very carefully at other ways to close the budget gap. We looked at things like deleting the restroom and concession building. We looked at deferring the parking lot. We considered phasing the project and trying to find some scope that would fit within the available budget. And in working with the ARC and the DPT over the past 2 weeks, there's really been a strong sense that the project really needs to go ahead. It needs to go ahead in a scope that is the project that's been imagined from the beginning. And so although we find ourselves at this time with the market conditions in a position where we'd rather not be, that is the fact of the situation right now, and we still have a need for playfields for both the school district and the community. And so with that, I think just reporting and kind of pre-reporting, I think what Gary will share with you next is that both the DPT and the ARC really urged the group to move forward with the scope of this project that was more in line with what the expectations were to begin with. Even if that would mean that we do have to add funding, there was a need for this field, these facilities, and that we shouldn't be left with something that's half done, either phased, rebid, or not quite complete with all the amenities. I'd be happy to answer any questions, or I can turn it back to Gary to kind of go over the numbers.
Why don't we go through what we've got, Ned, and then I'm sure there'll be some questions. If I can speak from up here. I just want to take a moment, too, and thank the school district and the council for working together on this project. As I said, it's taken a long time, and the community has essentially told us that they want a project like this to occur, and they've certainly been supported both through the support of the school district bond and support of the city council in making these types of decisions. As Ned indicated, when we first started to design this project, the economy started to come back. We saw bids that were far in excess of what we'd expected. However, in looking at a member of the Authorized Representatives Committee, which has 3 members of district representation, including the superintendent, the business manager, and a board member, as well as a city councilman, myself, and Dwight Curtis, our Parks and Rec director on behalf of the city, looked at the project and tried to see what we could do to bring that base bid back in. As Ned indicated, we looked at things as draconian as pulling out the restrooms, you name it, not paving the parking lot, phasing the parking lot in. The city has a regulation that parking lots need to be paved within 5 years of the development, so that would just be deferring some of the cost. As you know, asphalt costs have not been going down, they've been going up, so we would just be trading paving now for some future liability. So the determination was made to see what we could do to try and bring that bid in. So as Ned indicated, he and Bill Belknap, our Community Development Director, had a lot of discussions with the contractor, looking at alternatives to try and find out if there were places where funds could be saved. In addition, the ARC met with the design planning team, which helped develop the scope of the project originally, and it was determined at that time, and the ARC, I think, had already come to this conclusion, that we wanted to have a project that the community could be proud of, that gave the elements that had originally been scoped in the project. So that was something that we looked at, not just cutting, not just trying to find savings, but also how could we get something that we had anticipated that we wanted to do. So the DPT then, as I said, met with the ARC, and we came up with some alternatives that hopefully this board and the City Council will determine will be a good thing to move ahead with. Those alternatives, as I indicated to the City Council a couple weeks ago, there are different things that we could have done. We could have deferred the bid, rejected all bids, and gone back out to bid. As Ned indicated, we don't see the construction mini boom, whatever you want to call it, is going to die out in the next year to 18 months. So we can't expect that there will be significant savings by rebidding, but we will lose another season of development of the property if we do that. If we went out to rebid, it'd probably be in October, so we would lose this entire construction season if that were to happen. As you know, we've been talking about this since '97. We've missed a generation of youth at this point. Delaying it any further will just amplify that problem. We looked at were there places to save money. Ned hit on that. We looked at additional funding. As I indicated to the City Council a couple of weeks ago, that essentially is the proposal that we've come up with this time. So I will, without further ado, go into that. And I would invite Greg Bailey at any time, who's worked very closely with us, and Deb on this project as equal partners. If you have anything to add, feel free. If I can figure out how to run this.
Wrong red X.
Got it. You're doing okay so far, Gary.
Now I don't know if I quite know what I'm doing.
I can
but-
help you on that.
You may need some joint help here.
Okay, we just have a couple of slides. This is the basic layout as Ned just showed, and this was the design that was forwarded and placed out to bid. I won't spend a lot of time on that because we want to leave a lot of time for the board and the council to have discussions about this. As both Bill and Kim mentioned, this is a regular meeting of both bodies. So after the discussion today, the council and the board, if they so choose, can take action, and we will talk about that a little later, what those actions might be. Okay, this is a proposal that we have put together for council and board consideration. This document it's a fairly busy document. It's been sent out to the board and the City Council. What you have here are the three bidders. These were the engineers or architects' estimates for the project and the different alternatives. This is the base field bid, which we had, as Ned indicated, we had a budget of about $2.5, $2.6 million for that. It came in, the low bid, apparent low bid was $2.97 million. And then we had 12 alternates. The alternates were set up so that we were sure to get a base product, and then we could add to that as we saw fit. We had hoped, of course, that we would get more competitive bids, and we could pick up each of those alternates as we move on. If you look at those alternates, some of them are pretty basic stuff when you're talking about play fields, dugouts for the baseball and softball field, soil conditioner, which is an additional way that we make that field more playable. Any of you have been familiar with Oiler Field or any of the other softball, baseball fields around the city. Drainage is a big issue in Moscow. We have clay-type soils. So what we wanted to do on this project is make sure that that field was playable as long as possible, and that means putting in drainage systems as well as soil amendments to help that.
A storage building. Storage building was for the placement of equipment. Some of the users would be able to store some of their equipment there to try and give it less of a cluttered effect, make it more user-friendly. Bleachers was something that was not in the base bid, but for some school district regulations, Greg knows about the playing regulations, you have to have places for spectators for competitive sports. The other one that is included here, and if you look over here, you'll see a number 1. Wherever you see a number 1 in this proposal, that would be funded under this proposal. A 0 means that it is not funded under this proposal. So the last thing that is included under this proposal is the east pedestrian path. This circumvents the east and north side of the fields, hooks into the Paradise Path at Carroll Rivalry Brink Park, provides some access to some of the other, at least the east or northernmost ball field. So those were included in this proposal. The other things that are not included, you'll see, are scoreboards, and the scoreboards were bid at the alternate from Gino Construction was $113. It was determined that if there is savings in the contingency, that those might be able to be picked up at a later time. Gino has indicated that they would hold that bid price open if we did decide to exercise that at a later time, or we could do something else. It's also an opportunity, if it becomes necessary. It's something that can be parsed out discreetly, and we could receive community help for that through the ball clubs, civic organizations, so on and so forth. Also, we have benches and banner poles. This was to assist with identification for pickup points, drop-offs for children using the facility. We've integrated that, we believe, into the public art component of this project, which will be funded through our public art fund. Council's already talked about preliminary discussions there. The superintendent and I have had discussions about integrating art and the work of students in that, because this is a student-driven facility as well. The last 4, Concrete Plaza is an extension. Parking lot removal, that was just an option whether we took the parking lot asphalt out and went over the whole thing or whether we overlaid it. Lighting was something that we wanted to put conduit in if it was ever decided to put lighting in later. It was a fairly expensive alternate, something that can be added later. Conduit will be placed underneath the hard surfaces, so should that lighting ever be added later, we won't have to tear up any asphalt or concrete. It'll already be there. And lastly, sump pump, which isn't a big alternate for some of the drainage and stormwater issues. So with that, what does that mean? Well, that comes to, with those alternates, it comes to $3,292,500. The deductive options, alternates that have been discussed with Ned and Bill and preliminarily with General Construction amount to about $190,000. Our contingency, which is right below here, was originally just over $200,000 at a 7% contingency. That can be trimmed to 5%. These bids were close enough that our architecture folks and Bill feel that we should be able to make do with the 5% contingency. So there's a little bit of savings there. Materials testing is something we added in. That was to make sure that the drainage issues on the field are addressed well, and we wanted to make sure that we could validate that. So we have a professional proposed to test that. That brings the total project cost to $3,275,415. We have available $2,782,726, leaving a deficit of $492,689. Okay, what do we do with that? We've had discussions. I met with the mayor, council leadership, about what would be a fair way for the city to participate in this project. It is a community project. It does have educational elements. We appreciate the school district's willingness to participate. And I would note, for the edification of those folks who haven't been privy to this entire agreement, that we have a term for our joint use agreement of 30 years that during that 30-year period, the school district and the city will equally share the maintenance cost of the facility, and the operations and administration will be provided by the city. It will be used for both community purposes as well as school district purposes, with priority being given to the school district purposes under the agreement. Okay, there are things that, as good guardians of the public dollar, as the council and the school district trustees are, we looked at, if we were going to make this happen, what would make that palatable to the city? With a 30-year lease, we would like to see an extension of that. We would like to go from 30 years to 50 years, and the value of that, along with some other things, would raise the value of our participation in the project. So what you see is city funding, and I'm sorry, that 33% this should be 75 and that should be 25. I'm sorry about that.
The pages are correct, though. Here.
That's the, yeah, right there. That should say 25 and that should say 75. I've only read this about 24 times. Of course, I probably got about 5 versions of it.